Hump day number 3. This is it. Big Wednesday. Thanks for coming back. I appreciate you being here, of course, taking time out of your day. I made a promise to you on day 1, and that was that I was going to take between 5 and 15 minutes of your time. A friend reminded me yesterday that I've gone over the 15-minute mark, not even come close to the 5, so we're going to try and move you back closer to the 5. Yesterday I was watching a movie. I take a couple minutes during lunch. I sit down in front of the TV, do my thing. Martian Child with John and Joan Cusack. I don't know if you've ever seen it. I sat down, I'm listening to this, I'm thinking about the show. The movie's about a kid who lives in a box. You know, little refrigerator box outside. He's got a little hole he looks through. What it was for me is the point where Joan says to John, parenting is tough, because he's thinking about adopting this little guy who lives in a box. See the movie, you'll see what I'm talking about. But the point for me was parenting is tough. Every single day it's tough. Yeah, there's some times where it's awesome. A lot of times. But there's a lot of days where it is hard. Hard, hard, hard. One of the things that's really hard, especially as you get into middle school, and you know this, parents that I'm talking to of middle school kids, are those peer relationships. Who are the friends? Where do these kids come from? The difference is in elementary school, you pretty much know everybody, right? You're going to pick them up, you know who's going over to whose house, everybody's friends, you know the parents because you see them all over the place. All of a sudden, middle school, there's 100 times more kids. Where do all these kids come from? Son and daughter's getting calls on the cell phone, they're getting text messages, the home phone's ringing. Where are all these kids coming from? Who are their parents? So, that's one thing that's different. The other is that your kids pretty much start to divide themselves. They find their group, they find their clique, if that's what you want to call it. So you've got some kids that become the social butterflies. They're hanging out with everybody. And then you've got kids that are off on their own. They're alone. They're kind of the social isolates. So what are you going to do with that? So we've got two different extremes. I'm going to look at both today just briefly, give you some practical ideas of what to do, how to stay involved, how to keep in touch with who those kids are, and and who their parents are. That's the most important thing. So, one, for the social butterflies. Here's a strategy that came to me via a friend and colleague, Annie Fox. So if you ever want to check out her stuff, anniefox.com. Author, longtime mom, speaker, she's outstanding. Her tip, offer to drive everywhere. You're like the fly on the wall, she says. You're in the car, you're getting to hear all that conversation. You find out a lot. You'd be surprised at what middle school age kids talk about, whether in the car. Tip number 2, if you don't know who these kids' parents are, you need to put in a call. Absolutely no excuse for not knowing who these kids' parents are. If you don't know who they are, they simply don't hang out. End of story. End of story. Tip number 3, if you have the time, and I realize, I understand work, all these other commitments. If you have the time after you drop your child off at school, just kind of linger around for a little while. Out of sight, of course. You don't ever want your child to know that you're hanging out. We're not going to use the term spying, but we are going to say kind of off in the distance, just observing. And what you're observing for are who are the kids that you see your child hanging out with. That will give you some insight right away. And on the flip side of that, if you have the opportunity to show up before school ends, show up. Again, off to the side, in the car, out in the parking lot, and just observe. Just observe. Don't need to share any of these observations, but just observe. What it does is it gives you a sense of confidence that you know a little bit more about who these kids are and what your son or daughter is doing. But the biggie is you got to talk with the parents. You got to find out who these kids are and where they're coming from. And number 2, everywhere. Go to the movies, go to the theater, whatever you're going to do, you need to be there, the one driving, because that's where you're going to find out the most. All right, flip side of the spectrum. Your child has no friends. Okay, for whatever reason, we can get into bullying, we can get in he's just been excluded, we can get in the fact that he came out of elementary school, didn't have a great experience, and so he doesn't feel comfortable. I'm using he, but she as well, doesn't feel comfortable making friends, maybe doesn't even know how to do that. So a couple things. Number 1, you can't force a fit. And what I mean by that is you can't have your son or daughter try and get engaged with a particular group of kids if it's not going to be the right fit for them. Here's a very specific example. Son or daughter not really involved in sports, but I know, hey, there might be a great peer group for them, so I sign them up for soccer. Not good. Not good, because they get out there, they feel even more isolated from that group. So the trick is we've got to find a place where they are going to fit. Where do you go? Youth groups, community service organizations. A lot of cities run community rec programs after school with a ton of different offerings. Get them into something that they haven't tried before, but they may be interested in. Okay, so that's tip number one. Tip number two is you've got to be patient. You've got to be patient and encourage those relationships, okay? Because finding friends is not easy. Be patient with it. Give them some time. Takes a little bit of time to fit in, okay? So be patient. That's tip number two. Tip number three, you've got to stay connected with your child's teachers because they have insight that you don't have. They're going to spend more time during the day with your kids than you are, believe it or not. Add up the hours. Simple math, simple math. Right? So you've got to stay connected. Every couple of weeks, you're sending an email, you're leaving a voicemail. I just wanted to check in and see how my son or daughter is doing in your class. You're going to get some wonderful insights that will keep you in the loop. Okay? The big one though for kids that don't have a peer group is you need to get them involved in something outside of school. Okay? Something outside of school. Because the peer group at school, for whatever reason, is not working out for them. Okay? So look at something outside the school environment. Okay, bottom line, remember back to when you were in middle school or in high school, your parents didn't like everybody that you hung out with. Come on, let's be honest here, okay? So you've got to be flexible somewhat. You've got to have your expectations. You've got to know that there's a positive influence happening there, but come on, you're not going to like everybody, okay? All right, enough said about peers. I could go on and on and on, but I want to keep it short today. A couple of announcements. A big thank you to those of you who are commenting on the show. I've already made some changes that I hope are becoming visible. Okay, you can check it out in the comment section. Tomorrow's show, 9 a.m. Pacific. Call in. If you're in the workplace, Skype in. If you don't know what I'm talking about, skype.com. Go there. Go there, because you can log on right from your computer while your boss is over in the corner. He's not going to see you. Skype.com, my Skype address, and I'm going to run it across the bottom here as you see this. I just got to put it in after. Skype.com, my Skype ID is Joe, J-O-E, Cadre, C-A-D-R-E 1, the numeral, Joe Cadre 1. You'll see it down there. The phone-in number, 310-498, let me make sure. Nope, 310-984. I had the numbers, reverse order. 1098. Okay? We'll be back here. Tomorrow's Thursday, pre-big show, which is Friday. 3 days. Thank you. Have a wonderful day. Take care.